How do you listen to your intuition? Welcome everyone to the Cope and Chill podcast, where every Tuesday we explore practical approaches to self-care and self-healing for better emotional and mental health and well-being. And I'm your host, Ron Martin. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching or listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening via audio podcast, please leave us a comment. Doing these things will help our show to be heard and seen by more and more people around the world and helps us to get better every single day. Joining us this week is Trang Pham-Nguyen, owner of the Happy Healing Shop. Trang is well-traveled and has been to over 40 countries. And she has noticed one thing in common with all who she's come across, and that is how people experience joy and sadness, had struggles and hardships, but also enjoyed beauty and had hope for a better day. Trang is an ex-Disney and ex-NBC Universal employee who has worked to assist some of the top executives in these Fortune 500 companies. Her experiences helped her learn what it takes to connect with audiences all around the world. However, it wasn't until she started her own business and co-founded the Happy Healing Shop, a grounded metaphysical and spiritual lifestyle company, that she finally attained the creative freedom and content creation that she desired and was able to help people in the way she wanted. Trang's mission is to show people how possible it is to get unstuck in life, to heal themselves using different tools and abilities, and doing deep inner work in order to shift their energy and heal in a safe, comfortable, and supportive community environment. She does this as a Reiki master, inner child and breathwork facilitator, and connector. The second part of her mission is to help people realize their true potential and show them that it's possible to create a business that is built with intention and meaning, one that aligns with their soul's calling and life's purpose. And she does this as a spiritual business coach and consultant. I asked Trang to join the show soon after connecting with her because of my fascination in learning how to identify and listen to intuition. If you're like me, perhaps you spent a life of trying to ignore the experience of emotions and bodily sensations, thinking that this was the way to peace and happiness. In other words, I thought that making the difficult emotions go away by suppressing or ignoring them was the best path to help me feel better. But what I found out is that that strategy only serves to make things more difficult for you later on. And that turning towards your emotions and bodily sensations, embracing them, and trying to understand what they are trying to tell you, that's the way to inner peace, because you are fully aligned with the guidance your body is giving you to live the life in a way that's uniquely best for you. Your body knows. The body has language. And you may have heard people say that your intuition is never wrong. Oprah Winfrey certainly said something to that effect. So how do we first hear what our inner wisdom is telling us? And how do we understand what it means? This episode is all about how to listen to your intuition and understand what it's telling you. But then we also talk about things that can get in the way of you learning how to do this. Perhaps past traumas get in the way. So then we talked at an introductory level about working with trauma, especially trauma from your childhood, as we explored the concept of shadow work or inner child work, what it is, and some things to think about if you're wanting to dive deep into your past and get to the root of some of these issues. Overall, I felt that Trang explained these concepts in a very accessible way and brought forth some great examples to help our audience gain a deeper understanding. My hope is that you find something of value for you on your journey through my discussion with Trang. And as always, please like and subscribe or leave us a comment wherever you're joining us from. Thank you. And now, here's Trang Pham-Nguyen. Hey everyone, welcome to the Cope and Chill podcast with Ron Martin. And today I'm here with Trang Pham-Nguyen, and she is the owner of the Happy Healing Shop. Welcome, Trang.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're here because you and I had a great conversation prior to this, and we wanted to bring forth everything you have to share to our audience here. And in particular, when I reached out to you, I sort of, I guess in my profile for the site that we're using here, I kind of indicated what I was looking to have in my show, and you came back with a whole list of fantastic things that you could talk about. And there were a couple things that did in particular pique my interest. And you've also shared that in your work, in your business, one part of your mission is to show how possible it is to feel unstuck, to be able to heal yourself through using different tools and abilities. And in particular, in your communication to me, you talked about the use of intuition and listening to your body and finding wisdom in your body. And so maybe you can tell us about how that can be part of the healing process, part of the process of helping yourself get unstuck.
Right. So, most of us probably grew up with parents that didn't even know what intuition was. And we were, in survival mode. Your parents, my parents, especially when they're ethnic families, it's just survival. What are you talking about? And do this, go to a stable job. And there wasn't even a talk of listening if this to your body, if this was the right job for you or if this felt aligned with you.
I
That didn't even
personally had that
exist.
experience with my own mother. Yes, absolutely. I remember the quote distinctly: "You've got a good job, stick with it." And I couldn't
Right.
stand the job. Yeah.
Oh, I know. Like, even if you're miserable, just stick with it because you never
Right.
know when a year or two later you're
That's
gonna get a
right.
better job. And it usually doesn't happen that way,
Yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
So, and then I feel like when you're going through a Saturn return or some people, if you're not spiritual, we can call it the quarter life crisis, like that.
Mhm.
And you're questioning things and you're going, why isn't this working? And, usually some life event happens that might shake you up. So for me, in this case, it was being at a miserable executive assistant role at Disney under a very, very abusive boss. And that was where my spiritual journey started because I met a coworker that was spiritual and also psychic and taught me all about the spiritual world and how she said everyone has psychic abilities. We just know it as intuition. And it comes through 6 different ways. Some people have a mixture of it, some people have one or two. So a lot of times we have that gut feeling, or when we're about to go to a party and we just don't feel like going and something feels off, or or for example, someone standing behind you when you're typing on
Yeah.
your desk, you don't hear anything,
You
but
can sense it.
there's something about where you just have to turn around to see if
Yes.
something's there.
Yeah.
So it's like that. But that's when we get really quiet and we're able to kind of listen. Um, and so that's been shut down for a lot of us, or even not even mentioned at all, as we grow up, especially like our generation, right? So when we take the time and set the intention to just sit and be like, hey, is this right for me? There's going to be tiny signals that you can listen to your body. And a lot of it is, if it's a yes, usually you're a bit excited. Even if it's a bit scary, there's something that your body expands, right? But when you
Mm.
don't feel good, then it kind of crunches up and contracts, or like some people get a really awful gut feeling. So I had a masterclass once about how to connect with your intuition and led people through a visualization. And when they saw the answer was a yes, people's bodies felt joyful. Um, they saw the color yellow, or like really bright colors. But then when I gave them a uncomfortable situation in that visualization, they saw the color black or really dark colors, or their body just started hurting in certain areas, And so I said, take that. And when you go into different situations and you feel that, know that that's how your body is saying yes. And that's how your body is saying no.
I think that's amazing, and especially the way that you explain that, because something, I wish I had met you 25 years ago, because I have been living a life where I've been experiencing these, and I love the way you said it, these contractions and expansions. I just never really looked at it that way. And I never understood that as being the language of my body, as being my intuition speaking to me. And so when you talk about um, expanding, that as I've come to know what intuition is, I have definitely felt that sense of almost like a relief I love the word expansion, a sense of calm, a sense of joy, right, around maybe a decision that I should move towards. And then a lot of the times, because of the work I do on a daily basis, I often feel that contraction of this is, and which has probably always been a sign that I needed to move away from that, much like you did with your job at Disney. So you talk about this. How does one actually learn if you've lived a life of not being able to know how to listen to your body, to listen to the intuition that comes from your body? How does one learn to start tuning into those signals?
Yeah. So I think a common question that is asked is, how do you know if it's fear or, a trauma response versus my intuition really talking to me here? And I always try to explain that intuition is kind of like that quiet friend where you ask them, can you speak louder? And they're like, no, I can't. This isn't the level of my voice right here. It's just this low. And so you have to get in that quiet state. And, sometimes meditation doesn't really work for me because
Mm,
it's just, so maybe active meditation. So you know how you get those insights. And I know a lot of people listening in would agree with this, where you're folding the laundry. For me, it's washing the dishes. When you're in the shower, you're driving home from work, you get these aha moments, or you get
mhm,
these little messages that come through and you go like, oh yeah, I could do that. So that's kind of like another way of getting into that meditative state if it's hard for you to kind of sit down and close your eyes. And there's also a lot of free resources on YouTube where there's guided meditations to kind of connect. But also, another thing that taps into your subconscious is journaling. And I know it
mm,
sounds so, people say journal, journal, journal. But when you kind of sit down and really set the intention of saying, like, hey, I could use help to find a solution for what I'm going
mhm,
through. And then so you just kind of write about it. And I think sometimes people put that pressure of saying, like, oh, I didn't get my answer within the first 15 minutes, but you
mhm,
can keep
mhm.
writing and it might come, most likely it'll come later that week or maybe in 2 weeks, but it's more of like really setting the act of doing that. Another thing is a lot of people don't realize how intuition comes to them. And so we have a free quiz where it's actually which type of intuitive abilities you have. And when people take that quiz, they didn't realize all these little hints were ways they were getting
Yeah,
answers.
yeah.
So
What are
with
some
intuition,
examples of those little hints? Like what kinds of things come up that are examples of those little hints?
yeah, so there's before I list them, I always want to say, like, always see your medical
Yes,
professional
yes,
for
of course.
any to rule out any health symptoms. But so I'll start off with clairvoyance, and that's seeing. So sometimes people have reported seeing kind of shadows or glitter, or even from the corner of their eyes, or orbs and auras. And then sometimes they'll see images, flashes of images or videos that are kind of sent not in front of their eyes, but in their mind. And they see it and
Mhm,
they're like, okay, something's being shown to me. And that came out of the blue, left field. I wasn't even thinking about it. That's the thing about
mhm,
intuition. It's very a calm, quiet friend that just kind
mhm,
of slips in here and then they leave sometimes. And you're like, wait, wait,
mhm,
wait, what? Give me more, give me more. And then another one is the one we're talking about, the body, which is clair sentience. So that's your gut feelings. That's
mhm,
where you feel a pain or you feel your body expanding or contracting. Or, excuse me, or even when you walk into a room and you go, oh, this couple definitely had a fight. I can feel the mood of the room.
mm, mhm,
That's what I
mhm.
say. I know some people say energy, vibe, but to make people understand more, it's like, when you sit in a car, you can feel the mood being like, oh, they were just yelling at each other just now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's the clairsentience. And then there's claircognizance, which is for me how mind comes through. And have you ever been in that situation, Ron, where you kind of go like, oh, I know this isn't going to work out. I don't know how to tell them this, but I just know it's not going to work out. It's a weird one because it's very it sometimes you go like, is that my ego? Am I being cocky, being like, oh, I just
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
So, or should I give people a chance? I want to come off as a know-it-all.
Right. Well, I was gonna say, so was that the list there before I ask you some questions?
Oh, there's 3 more too.
Okay.
The one with the knowing as well. Sometimes you're very the answers to problems just come to you and you go like,
Mhm,
"Oh, I just know that this is the best way. This is the best route to go." or this is the best decision to make. I just know. It's just a knowing, you know. And then the other ones that probably are less, I would say less common. There you go. Is clear alliance, which is the smell. So sometimes you might smell out of nowhere cigar
Mm.
perfume of a
Oh
loved
my
one.
gosh, I've done that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you've had that?
Yeah, I've done about 3 or 4 of the things you've mentioned so far. Yeah, but go ahead. Yeah, definitely
Yeah,
I've done
yeah.
that one where I'm just smelling something out of the blue, and it's like there's nothing around me that could create that smell, and it's like, why am I smelling that? You know?
Oh, that's crazy. I haven't had that one, but I know some people have, and they say, "Oh, I smell my mom's perfume or like
Hmm.
my grandpa's
Hmm.
cigar."
Hmm.
So it's just usually them saying, "Hello, I'm around here, you know.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
here to help you. I'm always guiding you." And then there's the other ones where it's clairgustance, which is tasting. So sometimes
Hmm.
you'll taste their casserole or their brownies out of nowhere.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
also them as well. And then there's one where it's clairaudience, which is hearing. So this is the one where I know when I talk about on TikTok, people say, "Oh, it's schizophrenia." It's like, okay, well, that's why I say get your medical a professional to rule that out first. But people will sometimes hear kind of just a voice, not necessarily a voice. It's kind of like a voice, but in your head, where it's just one word. I remember. Here's
Mm.
an example. I had a
Yeah,
coworker
yeah,
who was walking on the street and she had the walking man sign. So the light
yeah,
said for her to go.
yeah.
And there was no one around her. And she heard the word stop. It's very calm. It was a very calm voice.
Hmm.
And she looked around being like, okay. And a semi truck flew past her. And the driver looked at her going, oh, like that, because he would have killed her if she took a few steps forward. So that is
Yeah,
another way of how it warns you. Like
yeah.
her intuition warned her. And that came out of nowhere. Again, she said no one was on the block. So that's another example. So those are
Well,
the
yeah, when you as you're going through the examples, I'm like, I can identify with many of the things that you said. I think, and it's interesting because you said that maybe your intuition speaks to you while you're doing some kind of activity, light activity or what have you. For me, it is, yeah, I meditate every day, but I don't ever get those kinds of messages to me while I'm meditating. I get them when let's say I set my alarm for 6 in the morning, and for some reason I kind of start waking up, but I'm not fully awake, and I'm laying in the bed maybe around, I don't know, 5:15 or something like that. And during that time is sort of that in between sleep and awake. That's when I really, my mind is and my body's, I get the sensations of the body, I get images. Um, but the smell thing, that's happened to me when I could be out and about someplace, and then all of a sudden I'll just get the smell out of the clear blue sky. I'm like, there's nothing around here that could be creating that smell. It's like, how am I smelling that? Right. And so I think that's really fascinating. But I think the other thing that you maybe implied in what you were saying, and what I'd like to explore a little bit here now, is if you've lived a life of denying and ignoring your intuition or what your body is saying to you, how do you learn to trust it? So you say this person you know heard the voice stop in their head. Now, I think I probably hear messages like that, the voice speaking to me in my head, not in a crazy way, but you know what I mean. It's like you're and then, but I ignore it. And maybe it's something that if I stopped to listen to it and gave it some attention, that it would probably have guided me to a better path. But I mean, how do you learn how to trust that? How do you, as opposed to just dismissing it and feeling like it's taking you off track from where you want to go?
Oh, well, most of us learn it the hard way where we don't listen to it. And then it smacks us about 5 times in the face. And then we go, okay, maybe I should. It happens all the time.
So we
And I
get the
think,
lesson, the universal
yes,
lesson, right?
yes. And some people learn it in 2 lessons, some people learn it in 15 lessons.
You keep repeating the
And
lesson if you don't learn it.
exactly. And so that's honestly how it happens. Trial and error. But most of the time when you're in denial and you keep denying it, and one day maybe you go like, you know what? I should have, people say a lot of times, I should have listened to my gut. I should have, when they're
Yeah,
trying to put a bet on something like, oh, I should have
yeah,
gone with my first answer,
yeah,
So
yeah.
and then when you do that 5 times, you're like, you know what? Maybe next time when I place a bet, I should just go with my first answer that popped in my head.
So why do you think people don't trust their intuition or don't listen to it?
Because it doesn't make logical sense sometimes.
Yeah,
And that's
right.
how the society works. We want, if you tell someone, oh, here's a rough one, maybe. If you're meeting your friend's boyfriend and you go, I don't like him.
Mm,
First off the bat, she's gonna be
mm,
like, why? You're making like, he didn't do
mm-hmm.
anything to you. You just met him. You're being
Yeah,
judgmental.
yeah.
And something in you is just saying, no, this guy's sketch, man. And so, in a way, like, do you say something?
Mm. You know what?
And,
With my first wife, my friends didn't say anything, and they told me afterwards. So
oh,
yeah, right, exactly. But they knew it. I kind of like blasted them for that. I was like, you should have told me before. Like we didn't think he'd listen. I'm like, no, I would listen.
yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. Some people you're like, I don't know if you would take our advice anyways,
Yeah,
especially if five people are telling you like, I don't think they're gonna be good for you.
right.
But I've never really met a person where I've never heard a story of we said, oh, we told them not to marry him or her, and then they said, okay, I'll drop the
Yeah, well, that's true.
relationship.
It is kind of
You
hard for
know,
most people. Yeah. Hmm.
exactly. And so when there's no evidence, so if there's no photos of cheating or that kind of stuff, like
Hmm.
full on evidence, and it's just a gut feeling of like, I don't like their character, something's weird about them. Um, they're very charming, but something's a bit off.
Hmm.
That's so it's really hard because a lot of people want proof.
Yeah. 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 So we're talking a lot about intuition and learning how to listen to the wisdom of the body and I'm sure everybody's heard of intuition, but now we're really talking about how it shows up in the body and the struggles with learning how to trust it and work with it. But there's something else that maybe plays into this too, which may be in the area of trauma, right? Childhood trauma, and I think maybe sometimes there that could possibly get in the way of learning how to listen to your intuition, learning how to trust your body, learning how to trust yourself, especially given the type of trauma you might have. And so there's um, many different ways to go at trying to address that trauma if you become aware of it and you feel like it's something that needs to be addressed. But one of the things that I learned about a year ago was something called shadow work. And as I got to learn more about it, I was really intrigued by it. But maybe you can help our audience understand a little bit what shadow work is. Maybe you can just explain it a little bit.
Yeah, totally. So for people that I just call it, so I guess in the spiritual world you can call it shadow work. That's like a term they use. If you want to look at it more in the maybe more psychology or clinical term, it's also known as inner child work. So it's kind of like, I won't say the deep demons because that sounds kind of not so great, but more of like we always have something we can work on in ourselves,
Mhm.
right? But that usually stems from somewhere in our past, usually when we were kids or when our caregivers, usually our guardians, our parents, didn't do such a great job of emotionally and mentally being there for us where we feel safe. So there's different ways that people cope as kids. So, when you have siblings and you were raised the same way, but you perceive things differently, or
Yeah.
one person wound up being like the going into drugs and alcohol, the other person wound up not going into that because they both kind of have different ways of coping
Yep.
even though the same things happen to them.
Hmm.
So a lot of times what you see is when people are anxious about things. Now, of course, again, if always check with a doctor, you might need medication, that kind of stuff or whatever.
Sure.
But a lot of times, when people are anxious, it's because there's stuff in their past or abandonment. They might have perceived feeling abandoned. I know this person where her mom and her got in a car accident. She was maybe 3 years old,
Hmm.
but she saw her mom being taken away in an ambulance. But
Oh my
how she
goodness.
perceived it
Wow.
was, my mom is leaving me.
Yeah. And it's a
And
scary
so,
situation to see an
mhm,
ambulance too. Yeah. Hmm.
exactly. So to this day, she's still working on um, the fear of being abandoned.
Hmm.
And it always, if you don't work on your stuff, it will for sure show up in your romantic
Yes.
relationships because we
Yes.
usually try to look for our romantic partner to fulfill those needs. And sometimes they're really subconscious. Like when you're three
Yeah.
years old, how are you like this is all when she was 3 years old. So if let's say if a guy doesn't get back to her via text or phone, then she's gonna feel that, oh, are they abandoning me? And so they start over texting. And so to that
Yes.
person, they're like, dude, you are smothering me. What is
Yes.
going on?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you're not aware of that and you can't connect the dots, then you're going to be like, what are you talking about? You're supposed to text me. We're boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yeah.
So that's how things like that. So it doesn't have to be something so obvious, like I was physically abused as a kid. It's really a perception thing. And we talked about this before
Yeah,
about like,
the emotional unavailability, right?
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. And it's it's funny because it's interesting because we go for certain people. You know how that friend you're like, oh,
Yes.
okay, why do
Always with the
they
same
say
person. Yeah.
yeah, or they're like, I always get the asshole, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, maybe it's you because this is the fifth asshole you've gone for, right? So what
Yes.
is it
Yes.
that why are you going for emotionally unavailable people? What is it from your past that you don't realize you're kind of chasing after?
Hmm.
So, and we talked about this before, Ron, with you and me and our immigrant parents, or like our ethnic parents, on how we just grew up and they were just there to raise us, they fed us and all that kind of stuff, but
It was a different
they
generation,
it is.
and the intuitive sort of softer stuff was sort of a luxury because you're right. There was a greater focus on just, hey, we got to get food on the table. We got to keep this roof over our head. All that other stuff that's extra,
Yeah.
right?
And I realized that after doing the inner work, how I became an adult at a quick age. And,
Mm.
children should technically really have their childhood to play, have fun. But I knew at such a young age, maybe 8 years old, that my parents were financially like low income. They were struggling. So I knew not to make any trouble for them, even
Yeah.
if I was, and they also, you know, Asian parents, old Asian parents, they don't ask like, oh, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
It was because I knew at that time I was like, I didn't want to bother them with anything. They already have a lot on their
Mhm.
plate. But at such when you actually look at a 7, 8 year old, you looking like, oh, that's a really young child. But
Yeah.
for them at that age to be able to perceive that. So
Yeah.
we kind of grew up being like extremely independent,
Yeah.
but it's from that. And so that's how those are some examples of how our childhood or our past has stemmed, and then it will seep into our relationship if we don't work on it, if we're not aware of it.
Do you have any tips for, let's say you are aware of some cycle that you keep repeating? Um, I think for myself, there's things that I'm aware of, but I'm not what I want to do is to make sure that I don't repeat them in the way that I interact with my children. And I worry greatly about that. But I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I'm missing about myself. Like, how do I see whether or not um, I am creating the same kind of impact that I don't want to create with my own children?
Well, the fact that you're already aware and wanting to do this type of
Mhm.
work is already the huge first step, because most people think they're fine.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, and then they're happy to just go down the same path that they were brought up in. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Or some people say, like, I don't, um, I hear this sometimes where, let's say there's a couple and they say, maybe usually the guy, if they're really avoidant attachment type of person, or they're in denial, they're usually, we already know what the issue in our relationship is. So why do we need a therapist or a counselor? You know,
Mhm.
it's miscommunication, or it's, and I want to add, like, for anyone listening in, when you get mad at someone not putting the socks into the laundry basket, is it really about the socks not going in the laundry basket? Because there's usually something
Right.
more. There's always something
Yes.
more.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, those small things tend to trigger bigger things that I don't know, just from my own experience, it's like, do we avoid those things that are really uncomfortable inside of us rather than turning towards them and embracing them and really becoming curious about them, right? I think the tendency is to just like, I'm just going to live with it and I'm going to avoid it and I'm going to act it out, right? That
Or
seems
put
to
up with
be
it.
what's that?
Or put up with it.
Yeah, or put up with it. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
some of the ways that you can address it is going, if you look up, and we also have this inner shadow work healing journal, is
Mhm.
that there are exercises you can do to kind of reparent yourself, to really, it really
Mm.
is reminding your brain to say, hey, this is not your past. You're here now and you're okay. So what you had, let's say revisit a time when you were young is some inner child, what we do in inner child workshops. And how are you feeling? Most people don't remember what happened. They do remember how they felt, which is
Yes,
maybe
that's
unsafe.
right.
They felt anxious
That's right.
when something happened to them.
Hmm.
And really, it's your adult self visiting your younger self. And at the end of that exercise, after going and processing all that happened, you reassure them that had nothing to do with them,
Hmm.
and also that they are loved. Because it's funny, it's like you're being a parent to your younger self, but a loving, giving them love that they didn't necessarily receive. But you go through this and you can revisit that exercise anytime, because there's always different scenarios. It's not like one scenario, right? It's always a buildup of things. And it is retraining your brain to say, like, it's you're okay, and your value is not your worth, your self-worth, your value, your self-esteem, your confidence is not based off this person or this incident that happened to you.
Oh my gosh, Trang, you just talked about like 4 or 5 different concepts. And like I could like have you back and we could have a podcast on each one of those
Yes,
things. I
please.
mean, I don't want to skip over the what you mentioned that may be something that's educational for our audience, which is the concept of reparenting, which you kind of explained there, right? But I think embedded in that, which was new to me until I took a meditation class, mindfulness meditation, and I learned about mindfulness. That what's embedded in there is the idea of having a relationship with yourself, right? And what you're talking about in reparenting is really about having a relationship with that inner child of yourself, that maybe that wounded part of yourself that still lives, as a child within you. But I think still the idea, I know many people who having just a relationship with yourself, period, that's kind of a foreign concept. Like the validation that you talked about, right? The telling yourself that it's okay, extending self-compassion, right? Compassion to yourself, validating yourself, extending grace to yourself. All of these things are about, you know, treating yourself as if you were your best friend. That's the way I learned it through mindfulness. But you're talking about treating your child, your inner child, as someone that you well, in a way that you would want to have been loved, I guess. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
also, I think another thing I see in this isn't a lot of people, but I see this in men, is that sometimes it's not also just the parenting, it's society. So
Mhm.
when, we think words, they don't really do much, but they actually do. When you tell a kid, don't cry because you just lost a game, don't cry
Yeah.
for spilled milk, you need to
Yeah.
man up. Um, Boys don't cry.
Hmm.
A lot of that is why so many of us, and particularly men, they suppress their emotions because they identify being a strong man means you don't cry, you don't show emotions. And that's why when I was younger, I used to think, I hear the word, oh, women are emotional and men are not. But then it makes me realize, think, is it because it's men that aren't emotional, or is it because they are socialized to not be emotional? Because that's what we were taught the role of men should be. So that layer on top of parenting is
Yeah.
going to create avoidance.
I
And
will add to that, especially being a man. I can tell you just from my perspective that it is that. So suppression is one thing, and that is definitely a factor of suppressing your emotions. So first of all humans have emotions, man, female, all of us have emotions. It's to your point, it's about the display of emotions. So men are more encouraged, one, to suppress, but two, it's not entirely suppress. It is to channel it into anger, because that is an acceptable emotion for men to display, right? The anger and aggression, which is why you tend to see hyper aggressive males, because there's a lot of pent up emotion they haven't really learned how to process. So they express it in the way that is most acceptable among men, right? And I have this challenge in some of the conversations I have with some of my male friends. So it is something that our society needs to deal with. Absolutely. Um, you talked about journaling as a way to help you sort of work through things and process. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I've done some journaling, and to your point earlier, maybe I didn't journal long enough, because I'm like, okay, I wrote a couple pages of what was on my mind. I don't feel any different. I'm not sure how it helped me. So, how is this supposed to work? What is it? What is this supposed to be like?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean when you say, because I have a journal called my venting journal. So I
Hmm.
just vent in it and be like, this is what happens, how I'm feeling. Rawr. But I think for journals that have what I found really helpful are ones that have journal prompts. Because, when you sit there, you're not like, okay, let me think about my past. But when they ask and dig deeper questions, or they have more guidelines, or they say, okay, now step by step, let's revisit this time, it kind of eases you into it. And so I feel like ones with guiding questions really help instead of some people, they can free write, they can journal anytime they want. But I think for a lot of us, we need that structure, or sometimes they have a very insightful question in a journal that's meant for doing the deep work. And that makes you really think, it really forces you to sit and think
Hmm.
about, let's say, how you perceived something, or
Hmm.
sometimes they give examples, and sometimes I'm the type that needs examples because I'm like, what are they talking about?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they'll be like, for example, like how you perceived your parents, or did you feel that it was purposeful, that they didn't want to, they want to neglect you? And sometimes it's not, it's just more of like they had to survive. So then you realize, you come to realization a lot of times that they just parented with what they knew, or they parented with the way their parents
Hmm.
did. So,
Hmm.
like, for example, people have that debate of spanking or no spanking.
Yeah, yeah,
So there's people that say, I respect my kids because that's what my parents did to me.
yeah.
So it's in a way like that's the example. We don't have a course of different ways to discipline your child. So you just take what happened to you and you're like, well, it kind of worked for me, I think. So I'm going to do the same to my kids. So we
Right,
don't
right,
have
right.
those tools and stuff. But I think like the journals that have those specific prompts help people like us really dig and think and sit
Hmm.
there and be like, okay, and versus an open journal where you just write anything.
Yeah. Do you have any tips on how to find the right journal for, for someone like us that has the right prompts in it? Or does your business sell them?
Yeah, we actually do have one that we custom made with just explain how inner child works. We have what my therapist she suggested to me is a color wheel of emotions. So
I
it's like
I
a
have one
rainbow
right
wheel.
here.
I love it. You can Google it because sometimes when someone says like, "How did you feel during this time?" You're like
Mhm.
angry, sad. But I guess that's it. Happy, but you can dissect the emotions even
Yes.
more.
Yes.
Frustrated, resentful, um, hopeless, things like that, and it really connects. It makes you dive deeper.
Yeah.
So that's that. We have that in there, and then we have journal prompts and exercises. There are
Okay.
also other books that you can find, I'm sure, on Amazon that if you look up shadowwork book or doing the inner work, that's another one as well.
Hmm. You know, coming full circle, going back to the whole emotion wheel thing that I have right here, and you talk about the different gradations, the more minute gradations of emotions. What I've found in using that, because someone might say, well, why do you have a emotion wheel next to you? And it's, well, because when I was going through therapy, there was that, and I know that I have uh, had learned to dissociate from my emotions. A way of reconnecting with my emotions was to learn how to name them, how to identify them. And I couldn't do it. I could not identify them. And so looking at that wheel, it's kind of like spinning the wheel on like Wheel of Fortune. It's like when you hit that right one, it's like, yeah, you get that body feedback that says, yeah, that's it. That's the one, right? So that helps you. At least that's been my experience. Um, anyway, so let's talk about your business, the Happy Healing Shop. And I know the second part of your mission, we talked for quite a bit about things that sort of were around the first part of your mission, but the second part of your mission is to help others realize their true potential and show them that it's possible to create a business that is built with intention and meaning, one that aligns to their soul's calling and life's purpose. That sounds so interesting. Tell us about that. I think you do that as a spiritual business coach and consultant. Tell us how you do that. What's your business?
So when people start off, I think when you hear the word business, most people associate with masculine energy, really cold money, money first, right? And so it's frustrating when you see that and you go like, oh, some people are discouraged from doing business because they think it's only about profit and not about people, or not about helping others. So it is possible to have one where you say, like, I can make money, but I also want to help other people and have the best clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you incorporate your values or what you want out of it, and using the right strategies and also the right intentions, it is possible. However, before you start all that and launching your own business, what I noticed from clients is actually it's the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And before I didn't realize that, and I just launched a business. I launched an online course, how to start your online business in 30 days, your spiritual and wellness business in 30 days. I remember thinking, why aren't people buying it?
Yeah.
And I learned over time that I missed a huge step, and it was
Mm.
getting people to build the self-confidence to that
Yes.
they can do it.
Yes.
Um, Also getting them through the mental hurdle of being on social media. What if I
Mm-hmm.
get attacked? Or what if I get mean comments? Or I'm afraid to put my face on camera because I
Mm-hmm.
don't look good. Why would people want to see me? Or there's other people with hundreds of thousands of followers. So all
That inner
those,
critic.
yes, the perfectionists and stuff,
Yeah.
they all go through that. And
Yeah.
if I can't address that first,
Mhm.
they will never ever want to launch their
Yeah.
business.
I believe
So,
that.
and that yeah, it's like starting a podcast, right? You're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I don't know. There's so many out there that talk about the same topic I am.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
like, who is going to want to listen to me, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you do have to just take that step. But how do you help that person take that first step when all those thoughts are going in them? And it really is kind of guiding them and coaching them onto what uh, new ways of thinking about it and also the
Mm-hmm.
reality of it. Like I tell
Mm-hmm.
people, look, when you're starting out, no one knows you. So if you mess up, no one knows. The first year,
Right.
you're really just trying to get people to know that you exist. That's really what it is.
That's right. Yeah.
You don't have to worry about those mean comments or all that kind of stuff until you start getting really famous probably or going
Mm-hmm.
viral. But by
Mm-hmm.
that time, you're making money, you have staff to take care of the comments for you. So it's just really reassuring them and being like, hey, I've been there and this is actually the reality. What you're thinking in your head, that's what you're thinking, but this is what really is going to happen. And so it's really helping them go through that process. And then they can start launching their business.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say too, I think when you're at the point where you're making money and you have staff, that's validation that what you're doing is helping somebody. So even if you get that critic, it might bother you a little bit, but it probably bothers you less because you have that validation that you're actually making a difference for others, right? That's the way I look at it anyway. But so, Trang, thank you so much for joining me. What is your URL? How can people find you?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of free resources on our blog, which can be found at thehappyhealingshop.com. You can find also our shadowwork self-healing journal there.
Oh, that's where
We
I'm
have
going.
online courses. Yes, we have online courses on there as well. And also a lot of free content on our YouTube channel, which can be found at the Happy Healing Shop. So all our social media is the Happy Healing Shop.
Awesome. That's great. And do you have an Instagram page as
Yeah,
well?
same
Okay.
as well, the Happy Healing Shop.
Great. Wonderful. Well, listen, I have really enjoyed talking with you, and I think that you've really shared some wonderful things for people to think about in terms of exploring paths for healing and self-healing. And it's just been such a pleasure. So thank you so much. Yeah, maybe we'll have to have you back to talk about some of these other things that you're into, because I think you're just into so many wonderful things, and you explain things so well. So, but thank you again. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you. This was so much fun. And I'd be happy to be a guest again. And I think just you allowing this platform to spread your word, your voice, and also allow others to spread their voice and their ideas in helping and serving others is just wonderful. And will come
Thank you
back
so
to
much.
tenfold.
Oh, thank you
Thank
so much. I
you.
really appreciate that. Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you were able to take some inspiration or something of value from today's show. To access all of the resources and links mentioned, please head on over to copeandchill.com or our video-based podcast on our YouTube channel at Cope and Chill, where you will find the show notes for today's episode. That's Cope and Chill, copeandchill.com. And for information about upcoming episodes, check us out on Instagram at Cope and Chill. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're joining us from YouTube. and leave a comment wherever you're joining us from. Please come back and join us again for next week's episode. But until then, take care of yourselves.